Good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to the Lepanto Institute's Anchor Team. I'm your host, Michael Hitchborn, and this evening we're going to be talking about the USCCB. We'll be talking about the Catholic Campaign for Human Development, um, and we'll be talking about just some other things that came up throughout the course of the week. I am currently editing my next video report, and I should be done with it over the weekend. I just finished. I just finished shooting it today. And I just got to tell you, it's been a grueling schedule for the last month because of putting out these reports on the Campaign for Human Development, trying to get these video reports done and uploaded. And it's been really difficult to try and stay on top of things, but I've got some interesting stuff to talk about. So we'll get into all of that. But before we get into anything, we're going to begin as we always do with an Ave. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Okay. So the first thing I want to talk about before we get into, all the other stuff that I've already got planned for this evening, I want to tell you, Tan Books has been very generous to us and we've developed a very wonderful relationship with them. And so they send us books and we are very happy to promote them on the program. And this week they sent me a couple of books, one of which is this one. It's Advent and Christmas with the Church Fathers. It's a 7-week retreat on the mystery and meaning of the Incarnation. So it looks like, I haven't actually read it myself. We just got it in the mail not too long ago, but I did want to give them a plug. It looks like a really neat kind of reflective retreat for yourself over the course of 7 weeks to meditate on and contemplate various aspects of the Incarnation, especially as we lead up to Christmas. And just to give you the table of contents very quickly, it starts with a brief history of Christmas, and then week 1, the hope of Advent, week 2, the peace of Advent, week 3, the joy of Advent, week 4, the love of Advent, week 5, Christmas time, week 6 is January 1st through the Epiphany, and week 7 is baptism of the Lord to Candlemas and ordered time. So anyway, you can pick this up at Tan Books. It's called Advent and Christmas with the Church Fathers. The other book that they sent us, and I have to say, my kids have been absolutely loving this book. They've been carrying it around the house. It is illustrated Christmas carols. So if you go caroling, if you like to, go out with friends and sing Christmas carols, this is a great little book. It has some really beautiful illustrations. Here's an example. So it's got some very nice illustrations. It's well put together, and obviously the songs are very traditional, and you can if you can read music. I can't read music, but if you can read music, then you can actually sing along and go caroling or whatever. So anyway, the kids, my kids, and even my 9-year-old, they've been going around the house singing Christmas carols. So it's just kind of neat. So there we go. 2 books for you for Christmas that you can go pick up at Tan Books. Highly recommend them. Please go and check them out. Now, tonight, I've got 2 different. Well, they're related, but they're on different tracks. Items to discuss with you this evening. The first is a continuing conversation of the Catholic Campaign for Human Development. Actually, before we do that, I think we'll focus on the USCCB's meeting. I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts on the meeting. I have some thoughts that I'll share with you. The first, it has to do with the election. Oh, so Karen says, "What? Your mom is a piano teacher, Mike?" Yeah, it caught me. Not only is she a piano teacher, but I played trumpet for 7 years, and I never learned how to read music. I learned each note as a fingering position on the trumpet, but if I pick up a sheet of music and I look at it, it means nothing to me. So, so there it is. I have to sit there and figure out what each fingering position is. That's what notes are to me. And then I can play it that way. But in terms of what it looks like on the page and what it sounds like in my head, there is no what it sounds like in my head. It's just not there. Anyway, with regard to the USCCB meeting, Archbishop Coakley of Oklahoma City was elected as the new president of the USCCB. And he has a reputation as being one of the more conservative and one of the more traditional leaning bishops in the country. And, those are good qualities. My personal interactions with him are not that. And it's, I say this with a great deal of sadness because I really wanted to have a good relationship with Archbishop Coakley when he was the chairman of Catholic Relief Services. I met with him personally. I sat down with him. I handed him a whole box of documents that we had discovered about certain projects that CRS was involved in Kenya. In that investigation, in that box, what we found were they were basically USAID and PEPFAR reports. In other words, when you get a grant from the government, you have to report to the government what your project is doing, who's involved with your project, what your progress is, what's been accomplished, what program materials you're using. You have to report all of those things. It used to be published online. I mean, PEPFAR very readily put this stuff all online. You could go through it, you could read through it, you could see exactly what each organization was getting and what they were doing with the material and what they were doing with the money. Not so much anymore. In fact, it wasn't long after I did this report on CRS's PEPFAR project in Kenya where suddenly PEPFAR wasn't so accessible and the information was a little harder to find, which is very interesting to me. But I also discovered in this project, in those government documents, what it showed was that Catholic Relief Services had implemented several programs called Healthy Choices. There are two parts to it: Healthy Choices 1, Healthy Choices 2. And Healthy Choices 1 is geared more towards kids, young kids. And it talks about sex, sexuality, that kind of thing, but more in terms of like how your body develops and grows. The second part goes into the mechanics of human sexuality, and it goes into the ways of preventing pregnancy, whether it's through contraception, condom use, withdrawal. It even talked about abortion. And it did so in a very positive way. It told kids, here are the different organizations you can reach out to and look up online to see what kind of contraception you can get and what's good for you and that kind of thing. Well, I gave all of that information to Archbishop Coakley. I sat down with him. I flipped through all of the documents that I had at the time, everything. And I handed it all to him. I distinctly remember in that meeting, I thought it was a good meeting, but he was incredibly hard to read. There was no facial expression with anything that I showed him, not a bit. There wasn't a sense of I'm disturbed. There wasn't, this is concerning. All he just kind of sat there and stared at me the whole time as I was showing him the information. And he closed the meeting with, "We take this very seriously and I'll look into it." And I thought, okay, well, I'm very happy about that. I'm glad. What he didn't know is that at around that same time, I partnered up with Steve Mosier, and we sent a researcher into Kenya to go around to Catholic Relief Services program areas to collect as much information on this project that we could possibly find. We got copies of the manuals that we found online showing that CRS was indeed implementing that. Our researcher interviewed CRS employees where they admitted that they were instructing kids on the use of condoms. We went to several areas where Healthy Choices 2 was being implemented by CRS's project partners. You have to remember, CRS is the lead on the project, which means they're responsible for implementing the program itself and getting their implementing partners to do the same. And the implementing partners all talked about how they were using Healthy Choices 2. Caritas Internationalis, which is a Vatican-run agency, Caritas of Nyeri, which is one of the regions in Kenya, had on their website that they implemented Healthy Choices 2. And they even mentioned on the website that Healthy Choices 2 includes instruction in condom use. We also, our researcher, interviewed children. Well, not children, but, teenagers, older teenagers, who had gone through the Healthy Choices 2 program under CRS's care. And they said, we were told about contraception as a healthy choice. So Archbishop Coakley didn't have that information because we didn't have that information at the time. And I didn't let on that we had a researcher going through the project area either. I just gave him the documentation that we had, and I said, we're very concerned about this. Well, in October, we got a letter from Archbishop. Well, I actually didn't get the letter. The letter was allegedly sent to us. I never got it. But I did get a statement from Joan Rosenauer, who was a vice president of Catholic Relief Services at the time. And she forwarded this letter back on to me after I didn't get it. And the letter said this. I don't have it right in front of me. I'm paraphrasing. But effectively what it said was that they looked into it. They talked to PEPFAR. PEPFAR said, oh, it's all a big misunderstanding. We're sorry that we said that you were doing these contraception programs in those reports. We have fixed the record. I went back and looked at PEPFAR's reporting on the same exact document that we had before. And as I went through it, all the sections that mentioned that CRS was implementing Healthy Choices 2 were stripped out. They were gone. And I thought, that's very interesting. So we also sent a FOIA request to the federal government, asking the federal government to give us all of the documentation about this particular project in Kenya. And when we got that documentation back, we found CRS's own reports to the federal government indicating how many children they had exposed to Healthy Choices 2, how many times they had implemented Healthy Choices 2 throughout the course of the entire project. And it wasn't until the final year of their implementing of this project that CRS indicated, you know what, there's a problem here with Healthy Choices 2. It talks about contraception, so we're going to move on in a different area. This was after they had already exposed tens of thousands of kids to Healthy Choices 2. So I had all of that information. And I wrote to Archbishop Coakley. I said, Your Excellency, I have your letter. We have further information that we really need to show you. Can we please have a meeting, sit down so we can show you this information? No response. Then Steve Mosier and I both sent a letter a second time really emphasizing how we needed to have a sit-down meeting with Archbishop Coakley to go over what new information we had. My dear friend, Bishop Michael Sheridan, God rest his soul, intervened on my behalf. And he reached out to Archbishop Coakley and said that, Michael Hitchborn has this information. You really ought to meet with him. And I have a copy of this email, by the way. Archbishop Coakley wrote him back and said, no, there's no need to meet. I've already talked to CRS and they've informed me that this is all bunk. So we had no recourse but to issue our report. He wanted nothing to do with the information that I had. He didn't want to believe me. He had already dismissed me because CRS had already dismissed me. That's not as bad as it gets. That was the beginning. During his 3 years as chairman of Catholic Relief Services, we issued a number of reports, and he issued a number of statements asking his brother bishops to dismiss my reports. In fact, I'm going to play for you here. Let me open this up. This is from 2016, the USCCB meeting in 2016. It was the last year that Carolyn Wu, the former president or CEO of Catholic Relief Services, was in office. She was stepping away. She was walking away from her office at that point. And this was her last speech to the USCCB. And so the applause that you hear is the bishops giving a standing ovation to what a wonderful job she had done. And then Archbishop Coakley comes on. And here's what I'm going to play for you now. Share screen. Okay, here we go. Let me make this big. Listen to this.
Bishop, so thank you for your encouragement, for your support of Carolyn and her outstanding work for CRS during her 5 years of service. And by a kind of bitter irony, even as Carolyn was just speaking, I noticed that an email came to my inbox from the Lepanto Institute with the latest allegations about CRS's work. But I think you're understanding that Catholic Relief Services is a Catholic organization from start to finish.
Yeah. I must have cut it off too soon, because after that he said something about how he hoped that nobody pays attention to that blogger. He referred to me as a blogger. He referred to the Lepanto Institute as a single person, which we are not, as a blogger. He also, when we put out a report on Project Access, or actually I was gathering information on Project Access, one of the things that I discovered in that project was that it was a series of inventory reports. And these inventory reports showed that Catholic Relief Services had received and distributed 2.25 million units of contraception. These were official inventory reports, and they indicated all of the different project organizations that were involved. So there was an organization called Merlin, there was an organization called IMA World Health, and a couple of others. But CRS was also indicated on these inventory reports. And we saw that they had received male condoms, female condoms, lofeminol, which is an oral contraceptive, Depo-Provera, which is an injectable contraception. There was an Implanon, I think is what it was, which is implantable contraception, and even surgical sterilization kits. And it had the numbers of each of those items, when they were purchased, and how many of those items were then distributed to the project areas. CRS was indicated in these inventory reports as having received and also distributed all 2.25 million units, all of them. Now, the response the official response that CRS gave, before I get into that, Archbishop Coakley sent a letter to his brother bishops, scrambling because I put out a statement to my email list. And in my statement to my email list, I told people, I'm in Africa. I'm getting ready to release a report on CRS regarding a project in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. I didn't say anything about the nature of the project. I didn't say what I knew. I didn't give any hints as to what it was. Archbishop Coakley and his team reached out to the bishops of the Democratic Republic of the Congo and sent them form letters to simply sign. I know they're form letters because it's the exact same wording for both letters of the bishops in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And the letters basically say, well, CRS is a great organization. There's nothing that they do that is against church teaching. Everything they do is in line with church teaching, et cetera, et cetera. But the wording is exactly the same. They were identical letters, which means they came from the same source, CRS. Archbishop Coakley forwarded those letters onto the bishops before our report even came out. And he said, Michael Hitchborn is getting ready to put out another attack on CRS. And we reached out to the bishops of the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and they told us everything is hunky-dory. Everything is A-OK. And here's a copy of the letters that they sent us. And I got a copy of that letter and the two attachments that Archbishop Coakley sent out. So he effectively called me a liar, but he also said, if things with regard to this report coming from the Lepanto Institute follow the pattern, we can expect that it will have a poor relationship with the truth. Okay. And then, of course, I put out the report saying that CRS received and distributed 2.25 million units of contraception, and here are the inventory reports to prove it. The only thing CRS could say in response was, well, we can see how it looks like that, but we didn't do it. Really? How did you not do that? Well, what they said is that the contraception was sent to the project area that CRS was responsible for, but they had made arrangements so that another organization would be responsible for receiving and distributing the contraception in CRS's project area so that they didn't have to touch it. In other words, CRS, acting as the principal of the school, looks out into the courtyard and sees that there are heroin dealers, selling heroin to the kids in the schoolyard. Well, he didn't touch the heroin. He's not dealing the heroin, but he definitely gave permission to the heroin dealers to be there to distribute the heroin. That's effectively what CRS was saying. Okay. This is the level of difficulty that I have with Archbishop Coakley. Do I think he's a malicious man? That's not my call. I have no idea. I hope not. I truly do. I hope that he just so firmly believes CRS and its staff that he was willing to accept the idea that Michael Hitchborn and the Lepanto Institute are a bunch of liars, and all they want to do is attack CRS and attack the way the church does charity and blah, blah, blah. I hope that's what he thinks. I sincerely do, because I don't want to think that he's a malicious man. But the way he handled the situation was to attack me in the face of solid evidence and to give ear to an organization that made all kinds of excuses for why what they did was okay. So that's my thought on Archbishop Coakley and his election as president of the USCCB. I don't expect big changes. I don't expect there to be a whole lot of hope that CRS or CCHD will be going away anytime soon. But let's move on to the next thing that I discovered, or that we know about anyway. One of the things that happened recently, and I'm sure some of you have seen the video, there was a man in New York. He's an ABC7 news anchor who is married to another man. And he recently started to feel kind of the pang of his conscience. And he realized, I need to go back to the faith of my youth. Not to, leave his sodomitical relationship, not to, actually amend his life and repent of his horrible, horrific ways, but to just come back to the church and to be received into the church once again and to be confirmed by Father James Martin. And James Martin, of course, publicized that in a major way. The Paulists up there in New York City, under Cardinal Dolan's watch, performed this sacrilegious act. And by the way, it is a sacrilege, because to receive a sacrament in a state of objective mortal sin is sacrilegious. He had no intention of renouncing his marriage. He was in that marriage. In fact, his husband was his sponsor. So there they were in the church. He gets confirmed sacrilegiously, and it's so wonderful, and there's beautiful music and blah, 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 and everybody's just looking so sappy. And of course, James Martin's got this big, stupid grin on his face. And the bishops say nothing. Cardinal Dolan says nothing. Everybody's silent. So at the USCCB meeting, and I want to remind you, Bishop Strickland is not, he's not a bishop of a diocese, but he, as a bishop, because he is a bishop, is permitted and allowed to attend the USCCB meetings. And without any real procedure to do so, he got up to the microphone and he addressed his brother bishops. Here's what he said. Go ahead and play this for you.
But since we're in the area of doctrine, I don't know how many of since we're in the area of doctrine, I don't know how many of us have seen on the social media priests and others gathered celebrating the confirmation of a man living with a man openly, and it just needs to be addressed. Father James Martin, once again involved, great pictures of all of them smiling. Here we are talking about doctrine. I just thought I need to raise that issue. I know it's not part of any agenda, but this body gathered, we need to address it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.
Thank you, Bishop Massa. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just a word of thanks. This has been a 9-year process, beginning with the doctrinal note, and sincere thanks to the current members of the committee and the former members, and to Father Kunkel, Dr. Legree, and Dr. Verbeek, and our two.
I'm just going to go ahead and pause it there. It's not worth going any further. Okay, was that too quiet for everybody? I don't know why it was so quiet. I put the volume up to the maximum there. Could nobody hear anything? Yeah, I turned it up. I don't know why it was coming out so quietly. And as you know, I'll just go ahead and say Bishop Strickland stood up there and he said, okay, some heard, some couldn't hear. Okay. So effectively, here's the thing. Bishop Strickland reiterated what happened. He talked about James Martin. He talked about the gay man receiving the sacrament of confirmation sacrilegiously. And in the course of that conversation, He said, you know, I know it's not on the agenda, but as a body assembled, we have an obligation to do something about this, to speak out. And all of the bishops that you could see in that video footage, of course, they're just kind of, you know, futzing around, they're twiddling their thumbs, they're, you know, scratching their head, just doing whatever, not really paying attention, might as well be pigeons pecking the ground. There are a few that are paying attention. It's hard to tell what their disposition is. And then, of course, in the background, I saw some civilians. I don't know if they're reporters or if they're staff members, but as soon as Bishop Strickland started bringing up James Martin, of course, they start talking to each other and they start tittering. And one of them kind of looks like he's laughing a little bit, and he's like covering his mouth. And he's like, oh, look, you know, so you have a situation now where a prince of the church brought to his brother bishops a very serious issue. He said, there's something extremely serious that we as bishops have got to address. And they said nothing. They just went on with their agenda. I mean, you heard Archbishop Broglio, thank you, Bishop. And that was it. And then you had that high-voiced bishop up there saying, oh, thank you. And it's so wonderful with this liturgical da-da-da-da-da. Why do they have such a high affectation in their voices? I don't get that. But, you know, there's somebody said low T. The thing is, it's almost like there's no testosterone in the room at all. There's no sense of, you know, moral outrage. There's no sense for a thirst for souls. There's no masculinity in that room. It's like there are a bunch of emasculated bureaucrats sitting around trying to talk about the best way to invest stocks, as if nothing of import is happening in that room at all, or nothing of import was even brought up. But there we go. So Bishop Strickland was able to get up there and say, you know, there's something very important that we need to address. And of course, they gloss right over it and never come back. They never come back to it. Thank God this kind of thing gets reported on the internet, because if it wasn't, no one would ever know. They would never know. Well, the bishops did accomplish one thing. This is a 4-minute long video. I'm going to play some of it for you, and then I'll stop it when I start to vomit. So let me go ahead and play this. It's a pastoral message on immigration from the bishops.
As pastors, we, the bishops of the United States, are bound to our people by ties of communion and compassion in our Lord Jesus Christ. And we are disturbed when we see among our people a climate of fear and anxiety around questions of profiling and immigration enforcement.
We are sad.
Okay, wait. You're alarmed by a climate of fear. People are afraid of a lot of things. You know, some people are afraid to go outside. Some people are afraid of the dark. Is there a climate of fear? What is this climate of fear? What's the nature of the climate of fear? Oh, you say that it has to do with, how did he put it? Let me bring this back up. How did he put it?
Fear and anxiety around questions of profiling and immigration enforcement.
Questions of profiling and immigration enforcement. So they're concerned that there's profiling going on. Oh no, that's what law enforcement does. They profile. How do they profile? They say, you know what? There are certain elements in society that are high concern for the stability and safety of our people. Profiling is extremely important in law enforcement. You have profiling that goes into fighting terrorism. You have profiling that goes on with fighting gangs. You have profiling that goes on with fighting drug trafficking and sex trafficking and all the stuff that goes along with that. You have to profile these people to get a sense of where the problems are so that you can track it. And you track it by following patterns. And you say, there's a migration pattern over here. There seems to be a high density population of gang members within that particular migration pattern. So we need to pay attention to the people that are in this area, who they are, what they're doing, who they're interacting with, and then we can determine if this is something we need to really fully investigate. And if there are arrests that need to be made, we'll make them when we find that the law has been broken. That's how it works. But these bishops, these feckless bishops, have no sense of law or morality, and they're just so concerned about the poor guy. I am sick to death of hearing about how they're concerned about people who are afraid. What about the people that are afraid of the drug traffickers? What about the people that are afraid of the gangbangers that are coming in and terrorizing neighborhoods? There was a whole apartment complex in Colorado that was taken over by a bunch of gang members just last year, and the bishop said nothing about that. They had no concern for the people that were kicked out of that building or held hostage because the gangbangers wouldn't let them leave. Where was the climate of fear concern there, Your Excellencies? They didn't have any real concern. Oh, but they're so concerned about this. Why? Because they know that the more illegals they can get into the country, the greater propensity they can have for Democrat votes. And if they can get the government to fund them again, they can start funding both sides of the immigration issue. The USCCB is a lobbying agency. That's why it was set up. It was not set up to help the poor. It was not set up to establish the Catholic faith. It was set up to lobby the government to pass programs to make the government do what they themselves are supposed to be doing. That's what the USCCB is supposed to be. But instead, it wants to be a lobbying firm telling the government to go do their jobs for them. They gave up charity, so what do? They create the Catholic Campaign for Human Development so that they can finance leftist agitprop groups to go out and to create a mess in society so that they can then tell the government, we need more government programs to fix this mess. That's what the USCCB does. The USCCB set up Catholic Relief Services as a major government grant recipient. So tons and tons, and we're talking $1 billion a year. Catholic Charities USA, that's $4 billion a year. The U.S. bishops are making bank by propagating leftist ideologies and getting the government to fall in line. That's the whole thing. Everything that they're saying here about these immigrants, these illegal immigrants, is not a concern for the poor, and it's not a concern for the poor guy coming across the border, because if it was, they would be doing everything they can to make sure that people are coming across legally. And they wouldn't be setting up way stations to help them come across very dangerous areas where people are dying and saying, well, we're trying to make it safe. It's the same mentality that says we need to give clean needles to a bunch of drug users so that they don't get hepatitis. And we need to make sure that they do drugs in areas where they're monitored so that they can get high and not die. Where's the concern for their souls? Why are you enabling people to commit crimes and to go against the moral law? But that's exactly what these bishops are doing. We'll go on. Let's see what else he says.
Are saddened by the state of contemporary debate and the vilification of immigrants. We are concerned about the conditions in detention centers and the lack of access to pastoral care.
We're saddened. We're concerned. No testosterone. Look at this guy. This guy looks like a zombie. That's Bishop or Cardinal Tobin. Looks like a zombie. He looks half dead. There's no life in these men. Their eyes are dead. And they're just talking about how sad they are and how concerned they are. Boo-hoo. You know what? I'm sad and I'm concerned that you have no concern for the moral life of the faithful within the United States. I am outraged that you have no concern for what happened in New York. And I'm deeply saddened that you have no concern for the souls of the LGBT rainbow movement that is marching headlong into hell. You do nothing to stop them. You do nothing to call them back. You do nothing to correct their behavior. Oh, but you did vote as a body to not allow transgender surgeries in Catholic hospitals. Well, that's a good thing, I guess. It's about a year too late. 2 years ago, I reported about how the USCCB, or the largest Catholic healthcare system in the country, called Common Spirit Health, was actively performing sex change operations within their outfits. Last year, they put out a pastoral letter saying, well, the ethical guidelines of the USCCB states that, you can't do transgender surgeries because it's not moral, it's not licit, it doesn't go along with God's design. Oh, great. So you put out a guideline and it was roundly ignored. So now apparently they're putting out a directive that Catholic hospitals are not allowed to perform sex change operations. It only took them 2 years when the problem was first brought to their attention. So there's that, I guess. But the thing about this whole video, and I really don't want to beleaguer this too much. Let's watch just a little bit more, and I'll tell you what I think about something else. It's an observation that it just pricks the back of my head.
Lament that some immigrants in the United States have arbitrarily lost their legal status. We are troubled by threats against the sanctity of houses of worship and the special nature of hospitals and schools.
We are grieved when we meet parents who fear being detained when taking their children to school, or when we try to console family members who have already been separated from.
They talk about a climate of fear, but they don't acknowledge the fact that what they're doing is fear mongering by saying that, there are people that are afraid to even go to school. Well, why are they afraid to go to school? What made them afraid? Oh, because they're not registered, because they're not citizens, because they're getting, free goodies that you and I paid for that they didn't pay into. So now they're leeching off the system. There's no concern for the people that paid into the system. There's no concern for the families that are working hard to feed their children, that are working hard to try and make sure that they have a house over their heads and clothes on their bodies. And we pay our taxes. By the way, most illegals work under the table, so they're not paying taxes. Plus, on top of the government goodies that they're getting on, to go along with that. But here's something else I want to point out, and this is something that a lot of people aren't picking up on. This video came out. I'm going to stop sharing it. This video came out 11 hours ago. Today. Came out today. 6 o'clock this morning. These bishops were in a USCCB meeting this week. When was the video made? That's what I'd like to know. When was that video made? It's 4 minutes long, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 different bishops that I count, just quickly, show up in the video. Were these bishops at the USCCB meeting and they just took their time out of the day to read a script that somebody then quickly edited and spliced together so they could release it by the end of the week? Is that how it worked? Maybe they got together Monday and they just had the bishops throughout the course of the day show up at a certain time. Okay, we just want you to read this 2 or 3 word, paragraphs of dialogue. And then we'll splice it all together at the end. Maybe that's what they did. But who wrote the script? Who put that together? There's a lot that goes into script writing. I know because I do a ton of it. There's a lot that goes into video production. I know because I do a ton of it. And there's a lot that goes into trying to ensure that the lighting is right, the staging is right. And I know because I do a ton of it. This isn't something that just happens on the fly. It takes planning. It takes thought, forethought. It takes all those things that go together. So they had in mind sometime in advance of the USCCB meeting that this is what they were going to do. So the big question is, well, who put it together? Who wrote this? Who vetted it? Who made sure that the words were particularly safely chosen so that they wouldn't find themselves on the wrong end of a lawsuit, so to speak? So it has to go through legal. There are all kinds of things that go into the production of that video. I suspect that the idea or the creation of it started at least a month ago, if not 2 months ago. Because as I'm listening to it, a lot of the talking points are old. They're very old talking points. They're not current. So this whole thing was put together on the fly recently, but with the specific intention of putting it out at the end of this month or at the end of the USCCB's meeting. And I think a lot of that is just to celebrate, the fact that the bishops got together and they were able to do it. So it's just, it's another one of those things. Now I've only got about 15 more minutes before we end for this evening. So I want to let you know what I'm working on currently and what we have put together this week. So over the course of the week, as you know, I put out that video report that I gave you a hint on last Thursday. I put that video report out on Friday. And so we sent it out as a press release. I think it was Monday. Yeah, on Monday we sent it out as a press release. And it did pretty well. Our video report was seen. It was picked up by the Catholic Herald in England. It was reported by LifeSite News. It was carried on several Catholic Talking Heads channels. So it's been getting a lot of coverage. Then we just did kind of a steady drip throughout the course of the week. Here are some of the other reports that we put out. We updated a report on the Ostara Initiative. Let me show you what this is. The Ostara Initiative, by the way, this is an occult symbol. I've reported on them before. CCHD continues to give them money. Look at this. So our previous reports, we found that they'd been awarded a total of $165,000 back in the day. And now they've got 6 grants altogether since 2019 when they got their first grant, totaling $355,000. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of cheese for this organization. And the thing about the Ostara Initiative is that it is a pro-abortion organization of its own admission. Okay, look, on its own website, right here, you can see Ostara Initiative, recommended articles. And one of the articles it links to right here says state standards for pregnancy-related healthcare and abortion for women in prison. And the article published on the ACLU website openly calls abortion a constitutional right. Whether an incarcerated woman decides to continue her pregnancy or to term, or have an abortion, she has a constitutionally protected right to obtain appropriate medical care. That's the article linked to by the Ostara Initiative. That's a recent development. Raylene Baker, who is the director of Ostara Initiative's Minnesota Prison Doula Project, participated in the 2023 Legal and Ethical Dilemmas in Perinatal Mental Health Conference, Reproductive Justice. And what the conference says, it defines reproductive justice as access to the care and resources to support their reproductive needs, such as family planning, contraception, prenatal and postpartum care, paid family leave, and abortion. It also calls for focus on mental health impact of the overturn of Roe versus Wade. So apparently it's bad for women's mental health for Roe versus Wade to be overturned somehow. The chairman of the board at the Ostara Initiative is this woman, Colleen Bell. And on January the 8th, 2025, she posted on Facebook an advertisement for the People's March in St. Paul. And the People's March in St. Paul is all about abortion access, youth and transgender rights. Okay. Gwen Bradford is the board treasurer for the Ostara Initiative. There she is. And on her Facebook page in July of 23, she posted a birthday fundraiser for Planned Parenthood. There it is. So, you get the sense of who these people are, but this organization never should have been receiving money anyway, considering that this woman, Erica Garrity, who founded the Ostara Initiative, in 2018, she and Raylene Baker, so I already mentioned Raylene Baker, these two together, they gave a talk called Reproductive Justice and the Justice System, and it was sponsored by Advocates for Reproductive Choice. And it spotlighted the Minnesota Doula Prison Project's work regarding abortion. Although Minnesota Prison Doula Project focuses on pregnancy, child care, pregnancy care, birth, and child care, Erica and Raylene described how, due to the lack of support for abortions within the prison, the doulas have sometimes served as resources for women considering abortion. So the prisons, their ministry. Okay, in fact, listen to this. The article also noted how both Erica and Raylene expressed concern that prisons were reluctant to permit women prisoners to commit abortions. Erica and Raylene, this is a quote, described how despite the fact that abortion is legal, the prisons are legally required to allow incarcerated women to have them. Many jails and prisons attempt to keep women from getting abortions by ignoring their requests or putting off their appointments until it is too late to have an abortion. And then a month later, there was another article. It was published on Feminist Campus, and it describes, it put out this article titled, "We Have No Idea What's Happening to Pregnant People in America's Prisons." So the article says, one group that has worked to support incarcerated women seeking access to reproductive health care, including abortion, is the Minnesota Prison Doula Project, which is a project right here of the Ostara Initiative. Okay. The Doula Project works in compassionate solidarity with incarcerated women to create opportunity, community, and change through the provision of pregnancy and parenting support for incarcerated pregnant people and mothers. The Doula Project provides birth support, trained doulas, blah, blah, blah. Through the work of the doulas, or though the work of the doulas was initially focused on prenatal care, birth, and mothering, they have recently aided a few of their clients in accessing abortion care, which demonstrates the group's responsiveness to the needs of the community of women they serve. It goes on. I mean, I've got all sorts of other evidence to show that the Ostara Initiative is indeed promoting abortion, but, I guess the direct evidence isn't enough to convince the USCCB that they ought to, maybe not fund this organization. But they've given them $355,000, which is kind of like the gambler who says, I could quit now, but I'm $355,000 in at this point. Yeah. And then there's the gambler's gamut that says, I'm due. Yeah, you're due. You're due for something. All right. Let's go on to the next one. Let's see. That was Monday, Tuesday. Or no, we started putting out press releases on Tuesday, did we? Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Yes. So 3. On Tuesday, we put out a press release on this organization called, and I'm going to butcher the name, Centro de Trabajadores Unidos en Lucha, or CTUL. And you can, I mean, it's such a communist looking group. This is such a commie symbol. Power. And Cthulhu. Anyway, this group since 2010 has received $635,000. Okay, including a recent grant just last year of 25 grand. And what we found, so the old stuff that we found is that the organization is explicitly supporting abortion, transgender, LGBT ideologies, and socialism. And we went through all of that in the old report. The new report that we have shows that Cthulhu has a political action fund. Look at this. So here's Cthulhu, and then here's Cthulhu Action Fund. Ooh, it's like Action Pants from the 70s. They share the same exact address, 3715 Chicago Avenue in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Now, the difference between Cthulhu and the Cthulhu Action Fund is that one is a 501c3, which is a tax-exempt nonprofit organization, and the other is a 501c4, which is a political action fund, which allows them to, endorse candidates. But they're the same organization. They're the same people. They're the same ideology. They're just two separate legal entities, okay? But they operate under the same building. They put out they endorse tons of candidates. I didn't want to go through a bunch of them because it's just not worth it to sit there and profile every candidate that they endorsed. But the candidates that they do endorse, all of them are either pro-abortion, pro-LGBT, or they're outright Marxists. And in often many cases, they're some combination of all three. Here's their number one pick for mayor of Minneapolis, Omar Fatah. Omar Fatah is a member of the Democratic Socialists of America. In fact, it says here, Democratic Socialists of America said that, he's a member of the DSA and that he campaigned on an extremely socialist platform. You have to laugh at this kind of thing because it's just so absurd. Fatah also advocates for abortion, as shown in a Facebook post from July 2022, where he said, take additional action at the legislature to protect and expand access to safe, affordable, equitable, stigma-free abortion care. He also pushes LGBT, transgender nonsense. You can see it right here. Heard from our LGBT activists, members of the LGBT community. I look forward to continuing my campaign, ensuring our basic rights are met for all residents, regardless of sexual orientation. The number 2 pick for mayor is this guy, Dwayne Davis. Dwayne Davis is an active homosexual. He's married to another man, said, alongside my husband, Kareem, to make a better world for LGBTQI community members. He wants to fight for the needs of queer and trans community members. He wants to develop new protocols to address homophobia and transphobia. So force everybody to go along with the LGBT community. He wants to create gender-neutral bathrooms, hold the city accountable when they engage in regressive behavior that harms our LGBTQIA plus residents. So that's who that dude is. All right. And it goes on. This guy, Jazz Hampton, more of the same, strong pro-abortion, anti-discrimination protections for trans community, reproductive rights. It's all the same. Okay. It's all the same. So that's Catul's Action Fund. Okay. Same group, different name, different tax status, but effectively same organization. We also found that Catul had been providing funding to several different organizations, Rock, Minnesota, Unidos MN Education Fund, and the New Justice Project, rather. And again, I don't need to read this to you. You can see for yourself. We are queer, trans, non-binary, Restaurant Opportunity Center of Minnesota. They then also call for people to support these groups, one of which is the Women for Political Change, and the other is the DSA Solidarity Fund, so the Democratic Socialists of America. So they're calling for funding for the socialists and for the queers and the transgenders, and they want LGBTQ people to apply for a position with them. And it just goes on and on and on. The Education Fund, UMEF, says that they stand for GLBT stuff, gender identity. Immigration laws have been used to uphold structural racism and cis heteronormativity, whatever that is. Our campaign envisions permanent protection for all trans and queer, blah, blah, blah. Again, more of the same. Okay. They want to protect Reproductive Options Act, safeguarding abortion rights. Okay. So Catul gave them money and they're out there promoting abortion and LGBT stuff. Then they also they financed, but have a strong working relationship with the New Justice Project in Minnesota. And the New Justice Project in Minnesota is all about the gay. Just all about the gay. It's pretty rotten. So anyway, it's just more of the same. We've covered a lot of stuff on them before in the past, but we put out that press release yesterday. And the one that we put out today, and I want to show you this, and it'll be the last thing that I show you this evening. Share screen. Border Workers United. Another CCHD grantee, updated for 2025. All right, so they've been getting grants since 2017. All their grant totals come to about $220,000. And what are they all about? They're about reproductive rights. Okay. They have another name, Fuerza de Valle. So Fuerza de Valle was a participant in this March for Action, I guess. Join us next week at Whole Women's Health, which is an abortion clinic. McAllen, once more to show love to our location abortion providers. Fuerza de Valle, which is Border Workers United, was a participant in this. The description is pretty bad. We are Texans who believe that everyone deserves access to abortion care. We pledge to give people the resources to tell their own stories and to voice their own support for access to abortion, support local clinics and abortion funds. Spread the word across Texas that abortion is still legal and that we're fighting harder than ever to keep it safe and accessible. That was the description for this thing that Fuerza de Valle was participating in. Border Workers United, back in 2013, they were upset. They posted this Huffington Post article saying Republican strategy to take Texas backwards. And it was all about how they were concerned that Texas, among other things, but Texas wanted to all but outlaw abortion. So the Republicans are bad for that. Here we've got Border Workers United having a wonderful dinner together with the National Institute for Latinas for Reproductive Health, which is a pro-abortion organization. Here, Fuerza de Valle went to the United Nations with the National Latina Institute for Reproductive Health and the Center for Reproductive Rights to discuss, domestic workers' rights, reproductive rights, access to medical care, the militarization of Mexican-American border, immigration, and issues regarding LGBTQ women. So again, down here, Border Worker United, Labor justice is reproductive justice. Now, a lot of this is old. It's from 2015, 2016. Some of it's from 2018. And so it seems, well, what have you done lately? The problem is, if they were told by the CCHD, well, maybe don't do that so much, at least just don't make it public. Yeah, that's a problem. They've never come out and said, you know what, we renounce abortion. We think abortion is evil. We call out anybody who thinks abortion is right to no longer think that. We won't participate with anybody who's providing or promoting abortion. They've never said anything like that. I don't think they have any intention to. But in 2025, so this year, this is so foul. Here they are. They were, participants? Yeah, included organizations at this big event called the Brownsville Community Gathering and Drag Show. Isn't that great? A drag show. Join us for a free night of food, joy, food, and connection. Enjoy Selena-themed drag show, local music, dancing, small fare, and community resources. Celebrate Brownsville's creativity and resilience with friends, family, and neighbors. An evening of art, pride, and community spirit. And then they have, go to the RSVP. We'll be joined by our friends at Border Workers United. And there they are. So it's just more of the same. None of this changes. But I have been working my tail off this week to not only get these press releases out, to get these reports finalized and uploaded, but today, the last couple of days, I sat down and I wrote out a solid script about the community land trusts that we discussed last week. I've got the whole thing put together. I will be editing it tomorrow and over the weekend. And by Monday, we will have a very solid report on the CCHD's financing of what amounts to an actual socialist movement. The whole thing, all the community land trust stuff is all Marxist. The whole thing is predicated on Marxist ideologies. It is the Catholic Church financing a socialist movement within the United States, and it's got to stop. So I'm putting that report together. We will be releasing it on Monday. So keep an eye out for that. But in the meantime, that's all I got this evening. So we're going to go ahead and close with our prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum. Benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen. Our Lady of Victory, pray for us. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. God bless you all. Have a great week, and I'll see you next Thursday.